All right. What's up, y'all? Episode 152 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. This is titled Allowing the Body to Work. Okay. Allowing the body to work. That's our slogan. That's our main phrase for the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. And this is going to be your official episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast where I really discuss what that means. So let's get into it. Okay, so what we do here on In the Image Clothing Company podcast is have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're 151 episodes into this before this one, and we do that, I do it, and I talk about it, okay? I call it the truth of all things because that's what it's called, in the truth of all things, meaning the living word of God. Now, you don't have to be religious, I'm not religious, okay? We're all human beings, though, placed on the same earth, a rock in space, okay? And we are just a mechanical machine. The human body, it only has one way that it functions, okay? We all have the same wirings, if you will. We're all sons and daughters of God. And so allowing the body to work is what we do under In the Image Clothing Company's main side. And yeah, there is four sides to us. So what I do in the intros is talk about each of the four sides of In the Image Clothing Company briefly. I talk about where clothing sits because in order to allow the body to work, we need to look at the thing that is placed physically on the body, and that's clothing. And then we get into the discussion, okay? So I'll talk about the main side first, as I often do, okay? The big thing, though, with clothing is it's not just about clothing. Allowing the body to work and what we do with that through In the Image Clothing Company isn't something you have to care about fashion for. It's not something you have to even purchase our products for. We give free modifications in clothing. But we don't only talk about the human body's function through the lens of clothing. We talk about eating naturally, sleeping naturally, standing, walking, sitting, hydration, breathing, really everything. And I mean it when I say that because when we talk about the human body as just being a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space, if we just show the anatomy of the body, if we get the body to work the only way God designed it to, the only way that it actually can, then we just transfer that over to anything we ever do. Sports, occupations, like I said, sleeping and eating, right? These things that we do so often in our lives, they can actually cause deeply ingrained imbalances into our bodies. Deep chronic patterning and scar tissue, as I say, right? So the big thing is the knowledge of how your body works and what it is really, and then what needs to be had to not restrict it in our man-made world placed onto God's earth. It's the 3rd of August, 2025, and things are a lot more unnatural than they ever have been, and they will only get progressively more so unnatural as time goes on, okay? The last days, as prophesied in Scripture. Now, yeah, right? That's just how it is. That's what I'm saying. The truth of all things, the Holy Bible, the Book of Mormon, true, actual, documented records of God in the flesh, Jesus the Christ. It's just the truth. It's something that if you look into it and you want to find out actually undisputed, all your opinions aside, your whole focus is to really see if this is true, you will find that it is. Because it just is. Okay, because God is. In other words, the great I am. Okay, so yeah, there is a center line to the human body. We live on Earth, okay? On our planet here, we have universal laws. One of them is gravity. And the human body has a sternum here in the front, in the rib cage, that bone in the middle, that's in the center. It has a spine from the base of our skull in the back to our very lowest part of the spine at our hips, okay? in the center. We have a trachea, this tube in the throat, where we breathe through, where we swallow any liquid or any food through. It's in the center. We have a nose. It's in the center. We breathe through the nose, and there's this thing in the center of the nose itself called a septum, and it separates the two nostrils that need to be evenly opposing the center. Okay, that goes into our breathing patterns. That can change our lungs left to right and our rib cage, and that can alter the spine. And we get in depth, okay, with the anatomy of the human body in all the ways that you could discuss it. We really, really talk about it deeply, deeply, deeply. Okay. Then there's the jaw. That's the last thing out of the ones that I've just mentioned, and I usually say it in that order. When I talk about the things in the center line of the human being that everybody has, at least to some degree. Okay, we've got our differences where we do. Amputations, deformities, as I say, anything can come up in anybody's body. But the foundational human structure, you look around and everybody's geared around the same thing because we're designed in the image of God. Now, the jaw stabilizes the entire body. You notice you clench your jaw when you're nervous or anxious or scared. You notice when you're leaning over or pulling on something or lifting something, your jaw tenses up. It's in the center. It stabilizes the whole body. It's got musculature that goes up to the crown of the head from the lower jaw. It's got musculature that comes down into the collarbone, into the first ribs, through the neck. Okay, the ears are right behind the jaw. There's musculature that supports our head on top of our body from our jaw. So the jaw is huge. We get into it, and I have, and we always will talk about it. But it's hugely important. And a lot of times, what people would call quote-unquote posture is really coming from things like the jaw. It's coming from things like the nose. Like I said, the deviated septum, the imbalance in our nose. It's coming from things like the eyes and maybe glasses placed onto the eyes/nose between them here that's altered the body, or the temples of the glasses that come back here and rest on our ears, but then right behind our ears is that insertion for the muscle called the sternocleidomastoid that goes from there down to the sternum and the collarbone. Okay, and that affects our jaw and a lot of things. So this is where quote-unquote posture problems are coming from usually. It's things like this that we wouldn't really expect. Now, there's no such thing as posture, okay? God designed the body with neutrals in it. The wrist, probably the easiest thing to show on camera. You follow from the elbow, down the forearm, straight out the wrist, and straight out the end of the pinky finger. That's your neutral wrist, okay? Now, if that pinky finger drops down, now it's gone down out of its neutral, and it can come back up to neutral. And if the pinky finger goes up, now it's gone up out of its neutral, and it can come back to neutral. The pinky can go backward out of its neutral, back to neutral, and it can come in out of its neutral and back to neutral. Then there's rotations in the forearm as well, okay? All just having a neutral position, okay? The body's about its neutrals, and it's about residing in its neutral position in all of it all the time, or else you're just chronically in one of the positions over the other one. And between those two is the neutral, okay? Like forward and back, there's a center. Like up and down, there's a center. Like left and right, there's a center. Center meaning neutral position to the body, okay? I say it like this: neutral, natural, and normal. Synonyms, all meaning the same thing when it comes to the human body. There's only natural things, always and only ever. There's man-made things, like I said, the man-made world placed onto God's natural earth, but our man-made things always decompose in the ways that they can. That's the thing, they're unnatural. They don't decompose all that well, and it takes a long time for them to. But before us and after us, everything will remain, and then we make man-made things while we're here. So our bodies are only natural. We have to be eating natural things, and we have to be within natural materials. This is what I say with clothing, okay? Clothing has to stay centered, fit correct, and be made of 100% natural materials. And the thing is, we understand now staying centered, okay, because there's a center of gravity. Even things like trees, if they grow on an angle, when the wind blows, they'll fall over easier, right? There's just a center of gravity to everything on Earth. And so we can see that pretty well easily after what I've said. Now, fitting correct, that's where it comes to the neutral positions of the body. And actually, I'll talk about where clothing sits right now because I'm laying this intro out a little bit different because of what this episode is. Allowing the body to work. And it's huge because it's our slogan, okay? And so I'm going to structure it like this. Talk about where clothing sits right now. The hips of our body just cannot be altered. The core of the body is designed to support the whole thing. It just needs to stay activated. Okay, musculature within the body, when it's working, it's activated, and then if it was just entirely limp, it'd be deactivated. Okay, and our bodies should always be activated as an entirety. Anywhere any of the body goes, all of it has to come because it's all connected. So really the only way the body can actually work and how we allow the human body to work is by letting it all work together completely, because everything's there to play a role. So it just has to. Otherwise, something else could try to be making up for the role that something should be playing, but then that thing that's trying to make up for the work still has its work to do, and so it can't compensate for something else. Okay? So our core should always just be working, supporting the whole body. That's what a core is. Like the core of the earth is the center of all of it. The core of an apple is the center of all of it. The core of an apple is where the seeds are. It's where the apple grows from. If you take a core out of an apple, the apple just withers away. Okay? So that's how the core of a human being is. It should always and just would always be constantly activated. There's no way to ever train the body. There's no way to turn on muscles. It just means there's something inhibiting them. If there's any muscles in the body that are not constantly working, it's all there. And if we just had never restricted our bodies, never placed them into shoes or into pants, into socks, into undergarments, into tops, hats, gloves, anything you could put on the body, ropes especially, and tied knots that are twisting the body around our waist or in our shoes, we call shoelaces, then the body would just work. It's designed by God too. Animals' bodies just work. You don't see animals doing stretches for a certain amount of increments. You don't see animals laying out workout plans or diets. They're designed to just function, and that is how the human being is as well. But we're placed into this man-made world, and really we're placed physically directly inside of clothing. So this is where I was getting, is where clothing sits. Our pants have to be entirely above our hips. There's a natural waist. When we bend left to right, we're not bending at our hips because our hips are connected to the ground by bone. Our whole legs, from the base of our feet up to our hips, is one solid bone structure. So no bending can happen side to side at the hips. We bend between the top of our hips and the bottom of our ribs at our natural waist. So that's where our pant waistline sits, because then our hips aren't restricted. Often people have their pants on their hips, their pelvis, right? The whole structure of the hips where the legs come up into. And then you've got, like I was saying, the compensation trying to happen throughout the whole body. And it doesn't just stop at musculature or bone structures around the hips. It goes to the tips of the toes, the tips of the fingers, and the tip of the head. The whole body gets altered if any of it is. Okay? And that's the thing with things like deformities and amputations, is we still apply, as in the Image Clothing Company, to anybody and everybody, even in those situations, because it's about a center of gravity, and it's about doing all we can to stay around the baseline human being structure. Because that's what you do if you have an amputation, is do all that you can to get a prosthetic to balance your body out weight-wise on Earth's gravity. Or if you do have a deformity, like a cleft palate or a deformed lip, for example, you get surgeries if and when you can to try to get your lips to seal. We talk about the importance of the corners of the mouth and keeping the lips centered, which, then travels to the jaw, and then we can seal our mouths. So the point is, there's nobody that's excluded under what we talk about, okay? Within the Image Clothing Company, that's something to make very clear, and I've said that since the very founding, because it's about the universal things. Having to breathe, having to balance on Earth's gravity, having to eat, and stay hydrated, okay? And then everything else still is trying all that it can to do what it can, even if there is something in the body inhibited, okay? From a deformity, for example. So here's the big thing with the pants. We also need our waistband to be slightly higher in the front, okay? Because our hips have a position where those muscles, the musculature of the core can actually activate. When we think about muscles, they only shorten. Muscles only contract. That's a video we have under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company, and that's just how it is. If you want to close your elbow, it's the musculature on the inside of your arm here, if we're calling this the inside, okay, the bicep, that shortens and it closes the elbow joint. Now the musculature on the outside of the arm, the triceps, there's actually 3 heads to the tricep, that's why it's called tri, like Trinity, right, like the Holy Trinity. These triceps shorten and that extends your arm. So even when we're pushing, all that is actually, on a musculature level, a pull of 2 endpoints together, okay? Muscles insert on one end and on the other end, and then they shorten to pull those 2 endpoints together. So muscles only contract in every part of the body. In our core, the area of our body where our belly button is, where you would think of as a 6-pack being, right? Our abdominal muscles, they have to shorten. And that's just how they would naturally be, because they would naturally work and muscles only contract. So our pant waistline has to be, I'll say just both things together here, entirely above our hips and slightly higher in the front than in the rear, okay? Now, our tops that we wear have seams just connecting the material together that's been sewn to be the top. And the ones on top of our shoulders have to sit evenly behind that little bone on the peak of the top of our shoulders. That bone is actually the other end of the collarbone. The bone that comes from there, the peak of the shoulder, down the front here and to the center of the body, where the trachea, the tube in the throat, meets the sternum, the bone in the center of our ribs in the front, okay? So you have a collarbone on both sides, okay? Right next to where the collar of your top is. So with our seams behind the peak of our shoulders, then our shoulders can be in their neutral position. Our shoulders just only ever work behind our head. That's where they connect. The musculature that connects the bones of the shoulder, like the scapula, the collarbone, the humerus, this shoulder joint to the body, it connects in a position where the neutral for that would just leave that shoulder joint behind the head. You have to have this collarbone clearing your neck, but you have to have your scapula in the back sitting in its neutral location as well. You've got musculature that connects from the top/rear of the shoulder, comes up, and then connects to the cervical spine, which is the spine of the neck, and then to the very base of the rear of the skull. Those are your upper trapezius muscles. And those are the highest muscle that supports the shoulder kind of. Okay, that sternocleidomastoid does as well. But again, just to get that in its neutral position, to even clear the jaw, your shoulders just only ever work behind your head. Okay, so shoulders follow shoulder seams. They're just going to. As we move, our shoulders are going to find the seam of the top that's on top of our shoulders, because gravity is just pulling it down, and it's just going to slide or move with gravity. And so, yeah, there you go. Okay. Man, it's huge. Okay, so we have edges of our tops as well. The edge seams of our tops just need to be as close as we can get right to the functionality of the joint of the shoulder. This is the thing. People will stretch their pectoral muscles, these muscles on the front of the body, in the front of your rib cage, right below your collarbones. But if your top is causing your shoulders to come forward when your shoulders only ever actually work behind your head, you're just chronically shortening the distance of your pectoral muscle. Okay? Now, if we think of the edge seams of our tops, and they're not right at the edges of our shoulder joint, just where the shoulder joint functions, then our pectoral muscles are having to pull our arm in to try to combat the top that's just in the way. And they'll just get overactive, and they'll just pull the shoulders forward. Okay, those pectoral muscles. So there's a lot of things like this, small things like that, just details to where clothing sits in really minute ways that are affecting the entire body and building up chronic patternings, meaning life-lasting patterning, scar tissue. The body builds up really gristly, tough tissue rather than loose, flowing, well-working muscles when the muscles can't work well because they're not allowed to be in their only neutral position because of clothing in the way of the body. Okay, so this is how I can say it, and it is the truth. Clothing is the only fix to human beings' physical problems. We discuss it in such depth. I know there's people out there that have claims that this will fix you, that will fix you, but there's just no opinion. It's like what I said about the gospel of Jesus Christ being the truth of all things. If you want to find out if it actually is true, and it's your every desire to find out, all opinions aside, if it really is the truth, you'll find out that it is. That's what we talk about here with clothing. It's the only thing placed onto the human body, and we give such deep, thorough anatomy explanations and context that there's no opinion, no dispute, but we just don't often think about it. We go to things like diets and things like workouts. And yes, it's important to eat natural things only. Okay, anything unnatural or artificial is fake, and the body's only natural. Okay, we talk about that. And yeah, it's important to keep your body activated, but we don't need to work out to try to get it to do something, because you can never train the body to do anything. It's only a machine with the functions that it has. It could never do anything else. So clothing is the only fix, truly and actually. Clothing is how we allow the body to work. But we get in depth. It's not just as simple as what I said there, though. That's where I say clothing needs to sit when I talk about where clothing needs to sit in our intros, which is where I do it, and other places as well, just throughout videos. But I add in a lot of other things, right? Keeping short sleeves short, keeping our sleeves off the joints of the elbow, okay? How sleeve cuffs affect body mechanics, keeping our long sleeves off our hands motion. How pants affect body mechanics. Well, really the cuffs of pants, how pant cuffs affect body mechanics. Keeping our pants off our feet and ankles motion. Keeping our shorts above the knee, off the flexion of the knee joint. And its full extension as well actually can get inhibited if the shorts are down past the knee joint. But then we talk about minute little things, free modifications in clothing. Okay, shoe tongue tabs. What's required in shoes? Keeping our feet actually flat on the earth rather than elevated off the ground with heels in our shoes, which would never happen unless we had a man-made thing placed under our feet. And just all the ways that we don't restrict the body, right? Natural materials in things like shoes as well. No give in shoelaces and drawstrings. And I think it's pretty obvious at this point, if you've heard what I've been saying, if this is like your first time ever hearing what we do under In the Image Clothing Company, for example, you still can probably know we can never have stretch in our clothing. Stretch just goes the opposite direction of the only way muscles could ever work. Muscles only contract, like we were saying, and like I clearly showed with the example of the elbow joint. Stretch in clothing didn't even exist just decades ago from today's date. And it's damaging to the body. So we have two things that I call prerequisites among all the modifications that we can and really need to do if they're within clothing. Two things that I do label as these are firsts, these are musts if they're there, okay? Because they're the most common things out of anything that could possibly be some slight little imbalance. These are major imbalances. Firstly, we are just weaving ropes across the top of our feet. When we call them shoelaces, it's just ropes. And there's only one way the feet will ever work. Just the mechanics of a gripped arch in the feet, right? We have 2 feet. Again, if you don't, then okay, we got to do all that we can do to get the body to work as though it does, because our feet oppose the center line of the body. They grip arches inward and they keep us vertical, supporting our whole body on Earth's gravity, okay? They only work how they do. And there's a neutral ankle that travels up to the knee tracking in line, that travels up to the hips being in line, that travels up through the spine, keeping it neutral, that travels to the shoulders, that travels from there up the neck to the head, keeping the jaw and the head neutral, but from the shoulders that travels out to the elbow, the wrist, the hands, keeping that all neutral, okay? Keeping the hand arches there, okay? That natural open palm, which correlates with the arches in our feet. So the whole body, right? We get in depth with the anatomy. This is what I mean, is these things. We talk about it so deeply. Like deeper than, it's not a comparison, but deeper than most other people, deeper than chiropractors even talk about it a lot of the time, or physical therapists, because you have to look at the body as an entirety, as a whole. That's the only way it could ever work. It's just all there. And our feet just can't be restricted. They're just ropes, causing a reaction with a weave patterning on top of our feet. As we walk, we are lifting our shoes off the ground. I don't think we think about that often. We think about standing on our shoes' soles, the bottoms of our shoes, but when we lift our feet off the ground, we're lifting our shoe off the ground with the top of our feet. And that's what the lacing is directly shaping, is the top of our shoe. So there's only one way to weave a rope there and not alter the feet. That's what we call In the Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique. The weave of the rope actually just interacts with itself in a way as well. Just whatever side's on top, going toward the outside or toward the inside, it's just going to cause rotations in the shoe. And then we tie our shoes as well, and that really causes rotations. That's just a knot. So there's 2 sides to the body. We have to tie each of those opposing sides evenly over toward the center line. So the right shoe, you tie the knot over toward the inside, and the left shoe, you tie the knot the opposite way, but also over toward the inside, because there's 2 sides, okay? I was 24 years old, give or take, before I started tying my shoes evenly. And we don't think about it, but they're just knots. You're just tying a rope, and it's rotating the whole leg from the foot all the way to the hip, And then that travels through the whole body to the tip of the head and the tips of the fingers, okay? So that's our first prerequisite in the Image Clothing Company's official shoelacing technique. And you can find that anywhere you can find in the Image Clothing Company. We have it in many, many places. Anytime you see me, Evan Strong, as the founder, in a video, and you just look at what shoes I'm wearing, they're laced within the Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique. Okay, so you'll find that. And then secondly, our other prerequisite is to remove all tags from clothing. Like I said with stretch in clothing, something that didn't even exist just decades back from today's date, tags didn't either. The materials that these things are made out of were invented within the past decades, 100 years from now or less back, and much less for most of them. Tags in clothing didn't even really start being placed there until the late 1900s. That's like 40-ish, 50-ish years from now back, if even that far back. Yeah, if even, okay? Things have changed so much in the world lately, more than ever before. And we talk about that a lot on In the Image Clothing Company podcast, as things are just progressively getting worse, right? The exponential rate that things are changing. Yeah. So we deal with problems that people just didn't have to in the past. So allowing the body to work is something we have to be more intentional about to even just have happen than anybody in the past. And the farther back you go, the less they would have had to even focus on to allow their body to work, because there was less unnatural things. There's more unnatural things nowadays. And again, continually will be getting worse. Truly. Not something to fear, but the last days, the truth of all things, getting closer to the second coming of God, Jesus Christ, to the earth again. Okay, truly, this is the truth. Don't believe me. And I haven't said that within this episode yet, but I say it so often. Don't believe me. Evan Strong, as the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, anything I ever say, take the truth within what I say, because truth is truth. And I'll never explain anything perfect, because I just am not perfect. No human being is. But yeah, that's just how it is, truly. So there's our two prerequisites, okay? Removing all tags does include the shoes as well, because they're doing a similar thing that they're doing anywhere in clothing. Tags either cause a physical gap that changes the body's only working position, like I was saying, it's only neutrals, and or just doesn't allow musculature to activate, because they're slippery and they're just a different texture than the other material that the clothing is made out of in the times that they are. So there you go. Okay. Now, that is where clothing sits, and that's a deeper discussion on it than I normally give. But you can see now what I mean on allowing the body to work and being placed within things that are going to alter the body. And it does come down to things like socks even, right? We show how to put our socks on even. Pulling them up, following that outward curvature of the lower leg, right? Don't restrict the calf muscles, those muscles on the rear of our low leg, by having too long of socks. But we don't want ankle socks and short socks that stop at our ankle joint, because then they're right on the joint and that can damage it. So we get in depth with a lot, okay? Knots around our waist, drawstrings. We talked about how shoe knots can rotate the whole body. Well, we also talked about the core of the body always needing to be activated, just because that's how it would always work if it wasn't inhibited. But then also the fact that it supports the whole body and has to stay centered. And if we tie a rope around our waist and we tie one side over the other, we're rotating our entire center, our entire pelvis structure, our entire hips, our entire core. Okay, just basically all the same thing worded in different ways there. So the slipped lap knot. And we tie the tail end to the center. Everything comes to the center of the body. That's what I show to use as the founder of In the Image Clothing Company for any rope type thing we could call a drawstring placed around our waist, because it keeps the waist entirely horizontal. That's what I'm using right now. It's what I use. Like I said, right, I am the founder of In The Image Clothing Company. And what's great about it is it's a slip knot. And so it can slip open and then slip closed just by pulling one side or the other. And you don't have to retie it each time you, undo the knot, because you won't be undoing it like you would tying a different kind of knot, okay? So those are some big things. Now, that was a pretty deep explanation on one of our forwards, the main side of In The Image Clothing Company. But then we have two other forwards, okay? In The Image Clothing Company Music, I make music, I play guitar, I'm a fingerstyle guitarist, as you heard a little bit in the intro. I also strum guitar, okay? But I do crazy things with nylon strings, is what I say. So I've got right now this little Johnson JG610R. It's a 3/4 size. I show the sizing and setup of guitar because we have to keep our hands and they're only neutral. The hands are essentially the shoulders. And if we alter our hands, we'll alter our shoulders. Like how the feet are essentially the hips. If we alter our feet, we alter our hips. So fine little motor skills with guitar have to be in an inline position, the only way the hands could ever actually work. So I show smaller guitars than most full-size guitars are what we have to have, because otherwise you're just reaching and tweaking your whole body and then you're really damaging your body, and that's not fun, okay? So stringing techniques are similar to shoelacing, okay? There's only one way to really have a string be strong, to vibrate and not alter the hands deeply, 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 okay? But I do other things as well. Metronome madness. I go off the top, if you will. I freestyle wordplay with no metronome, and I do a lot of just lyricism with a lot of meaning behind it. Gospel of Jesus Christ type wordplay. And then, anything else we get into on In The Image Clothing Company Music, we do a lot of that. Because I talk about also, the jaw and singing or articulating words when you're speaking lyricism. And man, right, just keeping the body in its neutral position while we make music. We really get into depth with the human body, allowing the body to work, right? Okay. Now, In The Image Clothing Company Poodles is our last fourth to mention. This is huge, okay? We specialize in purebred standard poodles. Now, this is the big thing before I even get further into discussing what In The Image Clothing Company Poodles is. We allow the human body to work. Under In The Image Clothing Company are poodles. Yes, our poodles, we let dogs stay natural. Now, it's the same thing as phrasing allowing the body to work, truly. But I just gave it a little bit of a different slogan so that fourth can have its own phrasing. Because a dog is just as a human being is as well. A mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space, okay? There's a center line to a dog. There's a spine, a sternum, a trachea, a nose, and its jaw, just like human beings. So when we place collars onto dogs or leashes or harnesses, slip leads, anything you place onto a dog, it's just like human being clothing, right? Like keeping collars centered. We talk about that under In The Image Clothing Company's main side, okay? And if there's a seam in the collar, we call it In The Image Clothing Company's dreaded collar seam modification, okay? Well, what we need to do, we call it the dreaded collar seam because it won't let the collar stay centered, and all that musculature that goes from the jaw down into the rest of the body through the collar of our top won't be centered. Because really our collar should sit above our collar bones, okay? So there's no restriction to the collarbone, and then be entirely centered. For those of you watching in visual plus audio of this episode of In The Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 152, titled Allowing the Body to Work, you can see all the musculature coming up through my collar of my top as I contract the musculature going into my jaw. Okay, collars have to stay centered. Otherwise, the whole body's damaged. That travels to the tips of the toes and the tips of the fingers as well, okay? So same thing with dogs. And we talk about dogs in the same ways, with hydration, with eating, and just having them be in a modern man-made world when they're natural. Same thing as human beings, okay? We've got a whole fourth of our company dedicated to, like I said, purebred standard poodles. The information we give applies to all dogs across the earth, but we have events, in-person events here in the state of Utah, the United States of America, where we're based, as in the Image Clothing Company, called Poodle Parade events. And they're not actual parades, but what we do is I give information on letting dogs stay natural. You can bring poodles that are purebred of any size or poodle mixes of any size, and we just have a good time. We'll do a lot of different types of poodle parade events, but in nature, in the mountains, in waterways, at parks, and we'll hang out and really just, if that's all it was, that's all it would need to be. But then, yeah, I will give a lot of information as well there, okay? So there you go. A little bit of rundown on the four sides of In the Image Clothing Company, okay? Yeah, because I could sit and talk about In the Image Clothing Company poodles and how big that will be, but I'll talk about it more throughout this where I do, okay, this episode here of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Now, the big thing is, I just want to make it so clear what we really do. So I think that's why I didn't say much more of In the Image Clothing Company poodles yet. I'll talk about it throughout this with the human body, because allowing the body to work, I want it to be a pretty thorough discussion here on, yes, clothing, and we give information on free modifications in clothing. We will have In the Image Clothing Company clothing as something you can always purchase, doing the things we say, staying centered, fitting correct, and being made from 100% natural materials. And that will allow your body to work. And we will have dog products always available for you to purchase, okay? Everything we get into with dogs, but collars, leashes, harnesses. Yeah, it's going to be really cool what all we get into with the same intent. But it's not only about clothing. It's not only about the products on the dogs. I really want to talk about this as clear as I do here, okay, to make it really clear. When we show how the body works under In the Image Clothing Company, when we talk about what it really means to allow the body to work, and when you get deeper understanding and context on the anatomy of your own body, the mechanics of your own body, then, as I said a little bit in the intro, I mean, we kind of just barely finished the intro of this, but quite a few minutes ago, on how we talk about literally everything we do, that's the point I'm making in this hard-hitting, okay, is what I want to do to the point when it comes to allowing the body to work and what we do under In the Image Clothing Company, the information we give and the eternal, unchanging information we give, and how we really do allow the body to work. Because once you know where your body's neutral positions in all of its joints are, once you know how to not restrict your body, once you know how to naturally sit, naturally stand, naturally walk, naturally sleep, naturally eat, naturally breathe, and naturally stay hydrated, those are the biggest things. Then you go into everything in your life knowing that. So now you get an occupation, you know how to approach it to allow your body to work, okay? You start a company or a career or some path like that, you know within that avenue of life how to allow your body to work. If you ever get a uniform for something, anything, I'm not even going to give examples because anything, but something you've been given to wear that you don't really get to decide, you know what's needed to be modified within that, because there's only one way the human body could ever work, and so then you'll be able to allow your body to work. wearing something somebody else gave you to wear that you didn't get to choose what it was. Okay? Any sport you ever play, a similar thing. Okay? Uniforms for sports, but then also the way to approach things, you don't have to focus on technique. You really don't, because there's only one way your human body could work. So then you take the information that we show on how to allow the human body to work under In the Image Clothing Company, and you just transfer that into approaching any sport you ever play, or any, holy cow, I mean, this is as real as it gets. Any mode of transportation. If you're riding a bicycle, or you're riding a motorcycle, you're driving a vehicle, you're operating any piece of machinery ever, we show how to allow the human body to work. We talk about the hand arches, and really a lot of that comes from our fingernails. You know, we talk about keeping fingernails all the way supporting the entire tips of the fingers because that's why they're there. And if we cut them at least relatively flat on the tips, and then you can round the corners so they're not sharp, but then our fingers won't roll around and we'll have a nice, good, solid, firm grip in our neutral wrist position, okay? Otherwise, you might be feeling like you need to train your arms or your forearms or massage them or work them out, or your hands, when really it's just that the tools that God gave you, your fingernails, haven't been allowed to be in the best shape to allow your body to work. Okay, so this is what I mean. If you ever, do anything in life, it's you that's doing it. There's the phrase, right? Wherever you go, there you are. And we need to know how our bodies work. And then wherever we are, that's the thing that we're using to do whatever we do. So that's really what we mean by allowing the body to work, is information that applies to every second of your life for the rest of it. And it applied back before you knew it as well, but we don't know what we don't know. And we really, really, really know under In the Image Clothing Company how to allow the body to work. Okay, so that's, I guess, actually where we'll leave this. I didn't know how long this would be, but I just wanted it to be very clear. It's nothing to do with clothing other than the fact that clothing clothes the human body. It's entirely about the human body. And it's nothing about fitness. It's about mechanics of our fleshly mechanical machine, the human body. It's nothing about workouts. It's just about allowing the body to stay activated as a whole, which it just would if it wasn't restricted. It's nothing about a specific diet other than just eating natural things, because the human body always and only ever could be natural. Okay, so allowing the body to work is actually very simple, and we just show how to do it. I'll say this before I cut it for sure. The hands are essentially the feet, okay? There's only one difference in the amount of bones in the hands and feet. Their operations are so similar. There's hand arches as there are feet arches, 5 fingers, 5 toes. The ankles are essentially the wrists. Very, very similar in functionality, okay? The forearms are essentially the lower legs. There's 2 bones in the forearm, there's 2 bones in the lower leg. Their functionality is very similar. The elbow is the knee. Very similar joint, okay? As you can see, we're traveling up the body. The upper arm is essentially the upper leg, okay? Just 1 bone, they do similar things. The shoulder is essentially the hip, okay? Very similar. Now we have the spine that just connects those 2 things, and then we have our head on top, with Earth's gravity pulling down on it and the jaw stabilizing the whole body, okay? So, allowing the body to work, we have to look at it just as it is. There's no opinion or way to approach it. It's just a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space. So when you know how your body works and how to not restrict it while placing things onto it, we call clothing, then everything you do in your life, every second of your life for the rest of it, you know how to approach it to allow your body to just stay unaltered. That's really how we could word it. That's really what it means to allow the human body to work, okay? And then with dogs as well, yeah, we'll get into a lot with poodles. And the information we give like that applies to all dogs, okay? Behavioral things we talk about with dogs apply to all dogs as well, okay? But yeah, there you go, okay? I'm going to cut it, and that's where we'll leave this, okay? So thank you. Today's the 3rd of August, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company. Stick around for the poodles. Stop back in, check out what we do, or just stay up to date with us, whatever you'd like, okay? Thank you.